The ship arrived without announcement. No shockwave tore through space. No dramatic flare of engines. It simply appeared at the edge of the solar system, its vast hull absorbing starlight rather than reflecting it, a silent monument of advanced engineering, drifting closer with calculated patience. Inside, the alien command deck pulsed with soft blue illumination. Holographic panels floated in midair, each one streaming data in real time. Gravitational readings, atmospheric compositions, thermal signatures. Every metric confirmed the same conclusion. Life, a planet teeming with it. Commander Vera stood at the center of the bridge, her tall silhouette framed by the translucent glow of orbiting Earth displayed before her. The planet rotated slowly in hologram, oceans shimmering like liquid glass, continents spread like ancient maps carved in silence. Primitive, one of the analysts muttered from a lower station, scanning through layers of intercepted electromagnetic signals. No detectable planetary defense grid, no orbital weapons, no large-scale energy signatures consistent with interstellar propulsion. Another voice followed, calm and almost amused. Their strongest transmissions are radio-based, outdated, fragmented, uncoordinated. A ripple of quiet chuckles passed through the bridge. Vera said nothing at first. Her eyes remained fixed on the holographic Earth, narrowing slightly, not in contempt but in scrutiny. "Show me their activity patterns," she finally ordered. The display shifted. Bright clusters of light appeared across the globe. Cities, movement, communication, conflict. The data unfolded in layers. Traffic flows, power grids, communication networks, military broadcasts, emergency responses. To the alien crew, it looked chaotic. Signals overlapped. Governments competed. Regions disagreed. Messages contradicted one another. There was no unified voice, no single governing intelligence directing the whole. Disorganized, an officer concluded confidently. Internally unstable. Species with internal division rarely survive external pressure, another added. Vera tilted her head slightly. And yet they still exist. That comment lingered in the air longer than intended. A technician adjusted a control node, bringing up a historical summary compiled from long-range signal interception. Images flicker across the hologram. Wars, technological breakthroughs, global crises, recoveries. Human history compressed into rapid visual sequences. Conflict, rebuilding, expansion, collapse, recovery again. Vera stepped closer to projection, studying the patterns not as isolated events, but as cycles. They destroy themselves. The analyst continued dismissively, but they rebuild, inefficiently. Survival through repetition, another said. Nothing exceptional. But Vera did not respond immediately. Something subtle stood out, not in the data itself, but in how the patterns behaved. Each collapse seemed to be followed by faster recovery. Each crisis produced stronger infrastructure. Each conflict resulted in improved coordination systems. Adaptation, not random, not accidental, iterative. Before she could voice her thoughts, a soft alert chimed across the bridge. Long-range probe ready for deployment, a technician reported. A small craft, no larger than a shuttle, hovered in the ship's launch bay. Cloaked silent, equipped with passive sensors capable of observing without detection. Its mission was simple: descend, scan, and confirm. Deploy, Vera said. The probe was released into the void. From the bridge, the crew watched its trajectory as it slipped into Earth's gravitational influence. It entered the atmosphere without a trace of heat signature, its cloaking field bending light and masking its presence entirely. The holographic Earth zoomed in. A region of dense forest came into focus, remote, isolated, far from major population centers. An ideal location for initial observation. The probe stabilized in low altitude, hovering silently above the canopy. Data began streaming back instantly. Temperature, stable. Atmospheric composition, breathable. Biological signatures, present. Technological interference, minimal. No detection, the technician confirmed. Their sensor networks are not registering our presence. A quiet sense of satisfaction moved through the bridge. Primitive systems, someone said. They rely on outdated detection ranges. We remain invisible. Vera watched the feed closely. The probe's camera adjusted, scanning across the landscape below. Trees swayed gently. No movement of significance. No immediate signs of advanced activity. Just nature undisturbed. Begin broader sweep, she instructed. The probe complied. It shifted its scan radius outward, expanding its field of detection across kilometers. The data continued to flow. Terrain mapping, heat signatures of small animals, environmental patterns. Then, a distortion appeared. Subtle at first, a minor fluctuation in signal clarity. Interference, the technician asked. Negative. Another replied quickly. No known atmospheric cause. The probe attempted to recalibrate. The distortion intensified. On the bridge, one of the holographic overlays flickered briefly. Signal stability dropping. The technician said, now with a hint of concern. Recalibrating. Vera's eyes sharpened. The probe's transmission began to fragment, not completely lost, but inconsistent, like something was interfering with the connection. Check for external interference sources, she ordered. The system ran diagnostics. Seconds passed. Then, silence. The probe's feed cut out completely. No explosion. No debris signal. No emergency transmission. Just nothing. On the bridge, every voice fell quiet. The holographic Earth remained spinning peacefully, unchanged, unaffected, as if nothing had happened at all. Vera stared at the empty feed, where the probe signal had once been. Report, she said calmly. The technician hesitated. Probe lost, he replied. No recovery signal. No debris. No residual transmission. Another officer leaned forward. That's not possible. It was operating in passive mode. It shouldn't have been detectable. Vera did not look away from the hologram. For the first time since entering the system, her expression shifted, not to fear, but to something far more measured. Interest, because in that quiet, unexplained disappearance, something had responded, and whatever it was, it had not hesitated. The silence that followed the probe's disappearance did not last long. On the alien command deck, the initial confusion gave way to analysis. Data streams were replayed, reconstructed, and examined frame by frame. Every sensor reading, every transmission fragment, every environmental variable was scrutinized with precision, yet the conclusion remained unchanged. No external weapons fire detected, one analyst reported. No energy discharge consistent with interception. Then explained the disappearance. Another snapped. Impossible, a third voice added. Their technological level cannot account for this. Vera stood motionless, her gaze fixed on the frozen moment where the probe signal had cut out. The last frame showed nothing unusual, just a forest canopy below, calm and undisturbed. No movement, no threat, no warning. And yet, the probe was gone. Rerun the atmospheric interference models, she ordered quietly. Minutes passed as simulations recalculated. The results were consistent. No natural phenomenon could have disrupted a cloak probe operating within passive parameters at that altitude, which meant it was not random, Vera said. The bridge fell silent. She turned slightly toward the central data console. Show me their communications. The hologram shifted again. A global network appeared, dense, interconnected, chaotic at first glance. Signals crisscrossed continents, bouncing through satellites, cables, and wireless relays. Voices, images, encrypted messages, all flowing simultaneously across the planet. To the alien crew, it resembled noise more than structure. Observe, Vera said. The display zoomed in on multiple regions. Conversations in different languages overlapped. Disputes, agreements, announcements, emergency alerts, news broadcasts. It's fragmented, One analyst noted, no unified control system, no central command hierarchy coordinating responses at a planetary level. Independent nations, another added, competing interests, internal conflicts. Their communication architecture reflects their division. A few officers exchanged knowing glances. Exactly as predicted, one muttered, they cannot organize beyond their own boundaries. Vera did not immediately respond. Instead, she leaned slightly forward, studying the flow of information, not as isolated exchanges, but as a living system. Zoom further, she said. The hologram refined itself again. Now individual nodes were highlighted, military networks, emergency systems, research institutions. Streams of encrypted communication appeared alongside civilian transmissions. Note the segmentation. Vera continued. Their systems are not unified globally, but they are layered. The technician adjusted the display. Overlapping networks began to reveal structure beneath the apparent chaos. Redundant pathways, backup channels, distributed control nodes. Redundancy, someone observed. Their systems compensate for instability by duplication. And decentralization, another added. If one node fails, others adapt. A subtle shift passed through the room. What had once looked like disorder now began to resemble resilience. Still, confidence remained. They are reacting within their own limits, an officer said. Localized optimization does not equate to planetary coordination. Vera's eyes remained steady. Show me their response timelines. The hologram adjusted once more. Time-stamped events appeared, natural disasters, infrastructure failures, sudden crises. Each was followed by measurable responses, emergency deployments, coordinated relief efforts, rapid information dissemination. The speed of reaction increased over time, not dramatically, but consistently. Interesting, Vera said quietly. What is? The analyst asked. They improve under pressure. The room grew still again. A new set of data layers appeared, historical sequences spanning decades. Earlier events showed slower, less coordinated responses. Later events demonstrated significantly faster mobilization, better communication, and more efficient recovery. Each incident strengthens their system. Vera continued. Each failure becomes data. Each disruption becomes adaptation. But they still fail, one officer countered. Repeatedly. Yes, Vera replied. Her tone carried no disagreement, only observation. They fail and continue. The phrase lingered. A technician spoke up hesitantly. Commander, are you suggesting their instability is intentional? No, Vera said. Not intentional. She paused. Functional. A quiet tension spread across the bridge. At that moment, another alert chimed, soft but distinct. External object detected. A sensor officer reported. Heads turned. Location, high orbit trajectory, approaching from Earth's surface. The display updated instantly. A small object had entered the upper atmosphere. Fast-moving. Controlled. Its heat signature minimal. Its path precise. Origin. Vera asked. The system analyzed the trajectory backward. Seconds passed. Then the answer appeared. Planetary surface. Launched from within the forest region where the probe was lost. A subtle shift in the room's atmosphere followed that statement. The same region. The same area. No coincidence. Vera stepped closer to hologram as the object's path stabilized in low orbit. It did not rise randomly. It followed a deliberate ascent vector, one that suggested guidance rather than drift. Identify the object, she ordered. The system enhanced resolution. The shape became clearer, not organic, not natural debris, a constructed device. Human-made. Their response time, one analyst began, voice quieter now, was immediate. Not immediate, Vera corrected. She studied the object's trajectory. Anticipated. The words settled heavily, because the implication was no longer about detection. It was about awareness. Somewhere on that quiet blue planet, something had noticed the intrusion, and instead of reacting blindly, it had prepared. The object continued its ascent, steady and controlled, moving into a trajectory that intersected with no known civilian satellite paths. It was deliberate, calculated, not defensive in appearance, observational. Vera's expression remained unchanged, but her attention had fully narrowed. "Maintain tracking," she ordered. "Yes, Commander." The bridge fell into focused silence once more, but the tone had shifted. The aliens no longer watched Earth as passive observers. Now, for the first time, they were being observed back. Silence lingered on the alien bridge long after the probe signal vanished. No one spoke. The holographic Earth continued its slow rotation, indifferent to the tension that had taken root aboard the vessel. What had begun as a routine observation had shifted into something else entirely, something undefined, something unsettling. Commander Vera finally broke the silence. "Rerun the final transmission logs." The technician's hands moved quickly across the control interface. Fragmented data streams reassembled themselves into the last seconds before the signal cut out. The probe's perspective flickered into view. Treetops swaying below, sunlight filtering through dense canopies, shadows shifting gently with the wind. "Playback stabilizing," the technician reported. On the hologram, the probe's camera adjusted its focus downward. The forest floor came into sharper detail. Uneven terrain, patches of movement, small creatures darting between roots and undergrowth. Still no large-scale technological signatures, another officer noted. No infrastructure, no visible monitoring systems. Yet something interrupted the signal. Vera said quietly. The technician zoomed into the final frame. At first glance, nothing appeared unusual, just forest. But then the distortion began again. A faint ripple across the image. Not environmental, not atmospheric, directional. The probe sensors attempted to compensate, but the interference grew stronger in the final moments of the recording. The image jittered, slightly at first, then violently, before cutting out entirely. "Pause," Vera ordered. The image froze. She stepped closer to projection, her gaze narrowing as she studied the frozen frame. Not the forest itself, but the pattern of disruption layered over it, enhanced the interference signature. The technician complied. The distortion magnified, revealing something subtle buried within the noise. A structured anomaly, not random, not chaotic, repeating micro-patterns within the interference. "That's intentional," one of the analysts murmured. "Or reactive," another added uneasily. Vera remained still. "If it were natural interference," she said slowly, "it would be inconsistent, diffused. This is localized." A pause followed. "Which means something detected the probe," she continued. The bridge grew quieter. The idea had been considered before, but dismissed. The probe was cloaked, operating passively, emitting no detectable energy signature. It was designed specifically to avoid detection by civilizations far less advanced than their own, and yet it had been interrupted. "Run a secondary sweep," Vera ordered. "Expand the scan radius. Cross-reference with any regional anomalies in electromagnetic activity." The technician initiated the scan. Data began streaming again, this time broader, deeper. Satellite intercepts, atmospheric readings, background radiation fluctuations, localized power grid variations. At first, nothing unusual appeared. Then, a pattern, not in one location, not in one system, but across multiple regions of the planet. Clusters of activity, brief spikes, localized disruptions in communication networks, short-lived anomalies in data traffic, rapid rerouting of signals, sudden shifts in frequency usage. "They're adapting," one analyst said, almost under his breath. "To what?" another asked. No one answered immediately. The technician overlaid the probe's last known coordinates with the surrounding data. Within moments, a timeline emerged. Minutes before the probe signal vanished, There had been a subtle increase in activity within a radius that matched the probe's scan range, not visible to the naked eye, but present in the data. "Look at this," the technician said. The hologram zoomed in again. Several independent systems, communications, environmental sensors, localized monitoring networks, had experienced synchronized fluctuations within a narrow time window. Coincidence? Too precise. Too aligned. Vera studied the pattern carefully. "Not coincidence," she said. The word carried weight. An officer shifted slightly. "Are you suggesting they detected the probe?" Vera didn't respond immediately. Instead, she replayed the final moments of the probe's feed once more. This time, she watched not just the interference, but the timing of it. The distortion hadn't appeared randomly. It had begun just as the probe stabilized its scan, as if something had reacted to the act of observation itself. "Intercepted systems," Vera said at last. "They don't need to see the probe directly." The analyst frowned. "Then how?" "Through pattern recognition," she interrupted. "Through anomalies, through deviations in their environment." A slow realization began to settle across the bridge. Humans weren't relying on a single detection method. They were using multiple layers, overlapping systems, independent, yet interconnected in function, distributed awareness. One officer said quietly, "Redundant." Another added, "Resilient." Vera corrected. Her gaze remained fixed on the data. The probe had not been destroyed by a visible force. No weapons fire. No explosion. No detectable energy discharge. It had simply ceased, which implied precision, control, and above all, awareness. "Send another probe," an officer suggested. "Different trajectory. Lower altitude. Faster descent. We test their response time." Vera raised a hand. "Not yet." The room fell still again. She turned slightly, addressing the entire bridge. "We do not yet understand what triggered their response." A pause. "And we will not underestimate a species that reacts without revealing how it reacts." Her voice remained calm, but the tone had shifted. Subtle, measured, reconsidering. "Begin continuous passive observation," she ordered. "No further probes for now. Increase long-range surveillance. Monitor their regional systems for coordinated responses." The crew acknowledged the command, but the atmosphere had changed. What had once been a simple observation mission now felt different, uncertain. On the holographic display, Earth continued its rotation, oceans reflecting sunlight in soft glimmers, continents passing beneath shifting clouds. Peaceful, ordinary. But somewhere below that calm exterior, something had stirred, something that had noticed them and had responded without ever revealing itself. Far below the alien vessel, Earth moved on as if nothing had happened. Forests swayed, oceans rolled, cities pulsed with light. Humanity continued its endless rhythm of activity, unaware, unbothered, and outwardly unchanged. But inside the quiet walls of a heavily secured human facility, something very different was unfolding. No alarms blared across public channels. No emergency broadcasts lit up global networks. There was no visible panic, no sudden mobilization of civilian populations. Instead, silence, controlled, deliberate, calculated. A room filled with analysts and operators watched a large display wall divided into multiple live data streams, atmospheric anomalies, satellite irregularities, electromagnetic disturbances, all clustered around a specific region. One analyst leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. "Confirm the timestamp." A colleague tapped rapidly at a console. "Matches the probe's last transmission window." Another voice cut in from the side. "That wasn't natural interference. Too localized. Too clean." At the center of the room stood a senior operations officer, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the shifting data. "No debris field," he said. "No thermal spike. No explosion signature." "Correct," the analyst replied. "It didn't get destroyed in a conventional sense." A pause. Then it was intercepted, the officer concluded. No one argued, because the alternative, that something had simply vanished without cause, was less plausible than the growing suspicion forming in the room. Humanity had not seen the probe directly, but it had noticed something, and that something had triggered a response. Initiate cross-network correlation, the officer ordered. Pull data from regional sensors, communication relays, and environmental monitors within the radius of the anomaly. The technicians complied immediately. Streams of data began merging across the central display. Independent systems, weather stations, communication towers, surveillance arrays, civilian infrastructure logs, were all compared against a synchronized timeline. Seconds passed. Then patterns began to emerge. A subtle spike in encrypted communication traffic, a brief rerouting of satellite signals, a localized shift in sensor calibration across multiple systems, not large enough to trigger public alerts, but consistent enough to form a pattern. Look at the timing, one analyst said, pointing to the overlay. These systems didn't react randomly. They adjusted within seconds of each other. Independent systems, another added, no shared control node, which means distributed response. The officer said quietly. All eyes turned toward the central display. The anomaly region now glowed faintly in layered overlays, each representing a different data source reacting to the same unknown stimulus. Something detected the probe, the officer continued, and something responded. A technician hesitated before speaking. Sir, the response wasn't localized to a single system. It propagated. The officer nodded slowly. Meaning, it wasn't one detection point, the technician explained. It was multiple, overlapping, cross-referencing real time. Another analyst added, like a network that validates anomalies through redundancy. A brief silence followed. Then the officer spoke again. Redundancy implies coordination. Not necessarily centralized, the analyst countered. It could be emergent behavior. The officer turned slightly, considering that. Either way, he said, they noticed, on the display, a simulated reconstruction of the probe's final moments played again. This time, additional overlays highlighted potential detection vectors, signal reflection inconsistencies, environmental disruptions, microinterference patterns, each one subtle. Individually insignificant, but together they formed a footprint, not of the probe itself, but of its interaction with the environment. Here, one analyst pointed, this spike, barely visible, correlates with communication reroute in a nearby urban node. And here, another added, highlighting a different region, a sensor recalibration occurred within seconds of the probe stabilizing its scan. The officer exhaled slowly. So they weren't looking for the probe directly, he said. They were watching for changes. No one responded immediately, because that realization shifted the entire framework of understanding. The probe had been designed to avoid detection by masking its emissions, but it had not accounted for something else. Detection through environmental deviation. Adaptive surveillance, the officer muttered. Not reliant on a single sensor, not dependent on a single signal. A network capable of recognizing anomalies by comparing expected patterns against observed behavior and reacting accordingly, which explains why the probe disappeared. The analyst said, it didn't trigger a visible counterattack. It triggered a response system we can't directly observe, another added. The room grew tense, because now the question was no longer whether humanity had detected them. It was, how much had they detected? The officer straightened. Begin mapping their response capabilities, he ordered. I want to know how fast they react, how far their detection extends, and whether this was localized or systemic. Technicians moved quickly, adjusting parameters, expanding data models, running simulations. On the display, Earth remained calm, unchanged, unaware of the conversation unfolding far above it. But in the minds of those in the room, the perception had already shifted. Humanity was no longer just a passive civilization beneath observation. It had become something else. something that responded, something that watched, and perhaps something that learned. The officer placed his hands behind his back, eyes fixed on the glowing sphere of Earth. "Deploy no further probes for now," he said. No one questioned the order, because the implication was clear. They had entered a space where their actions were no longer invisible. And whatever had been watching them had already proven one thing. It was capable of noticing the things they thought were impossible to detect. High above Earth, the alien vessel drifted in silent orbit, its hull reflecting distant starlight like a shard of polished darkness. Inside, the bridge no longer carried the same air of quiet confidence it once did. Conversations were shorter, observations more deliberate. Every new data point was treated with caution rather than assumption. Commander Vera stood before the central holographic display, which now showed a rotating composite of Earth layered with streams of historical and real-time data. The planet no longer appeared as a simple blue sphere of life. It appeared complex. "Continue analysis," she ordered. The technicians responded instantly. The display shifted again. This time, instead of focusing on a single region or event, the system compiled global historical trends, decades of human activity compressed into structured timelines, wars, economic shifts, technological breakthroughs, natural disasters, recovery cycles. The patterns were subtle at first, but as the data stabilized, they became impossible to ignore. "Observe this," one analyst said, highlighting a cluster of events, a major global conflict in human history, resource strain, rapid escalation, then, unexpectedly, accelerated technological advancement immediately following the conflict's resolution. Another dataset appeared beside it, a worldwide crisis, infrastructure damage, economic instability, then reconstruction, faster than the previous cycle, and stronger. Each major disruption leads to a measurable increase in technological output, the analyst continued. Not immediately, but in compressed recovery windows. Another technician leaned closer to the display, and the recovery periods are shortening. Vera studied the overlay carefully. "What is the variance between cycles?" she asked. The technician input the calculation. "Decreasing," he replied. "Each successive recovery phase shows reduced latency in coordination and implementation." A pause followed. Then another analyst spoke, voice quieter now. "They are learning from each collapse." The room fell into a deeper silence. The holographic Earth rotated slowly, now marked with layered timelines. Each region connected to global events, each event tied to a chain of cause and effect. It was no longer just a collection of isolated civilizations. It was a network of reactions, cross-referenced with communication patterns during those periods. Vera said. The system complied. Data streams overlapped again. During times of crisis, human communication networks didn't fracture further. They reorganized. Local systems coordinated with distant ones. Independent groups formed temporary alliances. Information flowed faster, more efficiently, under pressure. Coordination increases under stress, the technician observed. Not decreases. Another added. Vera's gaze sharpened slightly. "Show me technological progression rates." The display shifted once more. Charts appeared, representing advancements in energy, transportation, computation, and material science. Each graph showed a similar trend. Gradual growth during stable periods, followed by sharp spikes following major disruptions. "It's not linear," one analyst said. "No," Vera replied quietly. "It's reactive." The word hung in the air. Reactive development, not driven purely by stability, but by necessity. The technician zoomed into one of the data clusters. "Here," he said. Following a global conflict, there was a rapid surge in communication technology. Within a short period, global connectivity expanded dramatically. And here, another pointed, a crisis in resource distribution led to innovations in logistics and automation. Each example reinforced the same conclusion. Humanity didn't simply endure pressure. It adapted to it, and then improved because of it. Vera stepped closer to the hologram, her expression focused, analytical. "Overlay external threat simulations," she ordered. The technicians hesitated for only a moment before executing the command. Artificial scenarios were introduced into the model: hypothetical environmental changes, disruptions, and large-scale stress events. The system projected how human systems had historically responded and extrapolated potential responses to similar future stimuli. The results were immediate. Response times shortened. Coordination networks activated more efficiently. Recovery mechanisms engaged faster. Projection indicates increased resilience over time, the technician reported. Vera nodded slowly. And their systems? Another overlay appeared. Infrastructure networks, communication grids, defense protocols, emergency response systems. Each one showed signs of redundancy, multiple layers, fallback mechanisms, interconnected dependencies that allowed isolated failures to be compensated for by surrounding systems. "They don't rely on a single point of control," one analyst said. "Distributed stability," another added. Vera continued to observe in silence. Then she spoke. "Compare early-stage data to current structures." The display updated again. The difference was striking. Early human systems were fragmented, localized, and inefficient. Over time, they had evolved into highly interconnected networks capable of rapid adaptation and coordinated response across vast distances. "Growth through iteration," Vera said. "Improvement through repetition," the technician confirmed. A subtle tension returned to the room, because the implication of the pattern was becoming clearer with each new layer of analysis. Humanity's weaknesses were not static. They were temporary states, transformed into strengths through exposure to pressure. "Commander," one officer said carefully, "if their progress is tied to disruption, then conflict may accelerate their development." Vera did not look away from a hologram. "That is a possibility," she said. A pause. Then she added, "and one we must consider carefully." The bridge fell quiet again. Earth continued its rotation beneath them, unaware of the growing realization forming above it. What had once been viewed as a disorganized, primitive species was now being reclassified in real time, not based on what was at rest, but on what it became when challenged. And somewhere in that quiet understanding, a new concern began to surface among the alien crew. If humanity truly evolved in response to pressure, then the question was no longer whether they could be controlled. It was whether they had already begun preparing for something the aliens had not yet realized they themselves had triggered. The descent was precise. No dramatic entry. No visible shockwave. The alien landing craft slipped through Earth's atmosphere under full cloaking, its exterior bending light and dampening heat signatures until it became indistinguishable from the sky itself. From the ground, it would have appeared as nothing at all. Inside the craft, the alien delegation remained silent as altitude decreased. Beneath them, terrain unfolded. Oceans giving way to land, land giving way to structured environments. Cities, roads, movement. Lights flickered in dense clusters. Human civilization. Atmospheric entry stable, a pilot reported. No detection from planetary defense systems. Or at least none that are visible, another added quietly. Commander Vera had not accompanied this delegation personally. Instead, she had authorized a diplomatic contact team. Smaller, more flexible, designed to observe human reaction firsthand. "Maintain cloaking until final descent," the lead diplomat instructed. The craft lowered toward a designated landing zone, an open expanse far from major population centers, chosen deliberately to minimize unintended escalation. As the craft neared the ground, sensors scanned the surrounding region. No immediate military presence. No visible defensive installations. No obvious threat. And yet, data streams flickered in subtle patterns. "Something's active," one of the analysts said. "Define active," the diplomat replied. "Background systems, Analysts clarified. Low-level signals. Continuous monitoring networks. The diplomat considered this. Keep cloaking engaged, he said. We proceed as planned. The craft touched down with near-perfect silence. No dust plume, no sonic boom, just a controlled, invisible arrival that left no trace from a distance. Moments later, the hatch began to open. Inside, filtered light revealed the external environment, a wide, open field bordered by distant infrastructure. The air was still, quiet, undisturbed. The alien delegation stepped out. For the first time, they stood on Earth's surface. They paused, not out of fear, but observation. The environment felt ordinary. Breathable air, stable temperature, natural surroundings mixed with distant signs of human development. Roads cutting across land, structures rising in the distance. Movement, subtle but constant. Atmosphere matches projected readings. One diplomat noted. No immediate environmental hazard detected. Another added. They advanced a few steps forward, then stopped again, because something had changed. Not visually, not audibly, but perceptibly. The lead diplomat raised a hand slightly. Do you feel that? No one answered immediately, because the sensation was difficult to define. Not a physical force, not a sound, more like awareness, as if the environment itself had shifted its attention. Maintain composure, the diplomat said calmly. Proceed with initial contact protocol. At a prearranged signal, the craft external communication systems activated, broadcasting a standardized diplomatic transmission across multiple frequencies. The message was simple, clear, intentional, a request for contact. Inside human facilities across the region, the signal was immediately detected and flagged. On multiple screens, operators observed the sudden appearance of an unfamiliar transmission source. Its origin point had been masked until now, but once active, it became traceable. Unknown signal confirmed. An analyst reported direction consistent with landing zone coordinates. At the Central Operations Center, the same officer from earlier stood watching the live feed. Visual confirmation? He asked. A technician adjusted the display. Infrared, thermal, electromagnetic overlays. Then a silhouette, subtle at first, distorted by residual cloaking fields, but present, a craft, and just outside it, multiple figures. Confirmed, the technician said. Silence followed in the room. Not panic, not alarm, control. Orders were already in motion before the report finished. Deploy observation units. The officer said, no engagement, maintain distance, full surveillance only. Across the region, human response systems activated, but not loudly. No sirens, no public alerts. Instead, discreet coordination, unmarked vehicles repositioned, surveillance assets adjusted angles. Satellite feeds sharpened focus on the landing zone. From the human perspective, this was not an invasion. It was an event, one that had been anticipated. Back at the landing site, the alien delegation stood still as the first signs of human presence became apparent. Not visually, but through movement at the edges of perception. Subtle shifts in terrain monitoring systems. Remote detection indicators. Signals confirming that they have been noticed. They are aware of us, one diplomat said. Confirmed, another replied. The lead diplomat nodded slightly. Then the objective remains unchanged. He took a step forward. At that exact moment, a response occurred. Not loud, not visible, but unmistakable. Human systems, once passive, now aligned. Not centralized, not overt, but coordinated. The aliens had arrived expecting uncertainty from an unprepared species. Instead, they found something else entirely. A civilization that had already transitioned from observation to acknowledgement. And as both sides stood on opposite ends of the same quiet field, a silent realization began to take shape. This was no longer about first contact. It was about first mutual awareness. and neither side was willing to reveal everything they knew just yet. Orbit above Earth remained deceptively calm. Inside the alien vessel, the bridge hummed with restrained activity, data streams flowing, analysts monitoring, officers adjusting parameters. The diplomatic landing had shifted the mission from passive observation to active engagement. Every system aboard the ship now operated with heightened scrutiny. Commander Vera stood at the center of the bridge, watching the live feed from the surface. The alien delegation's presence on Earth was confirmed. Human monitoring systems had responded almost immediately, not with chaos, not with panic, but with organization. That alone was enough to tighten the atmosphere aboard the ship. Surface response is stable, a technician reported. No aggressive maneuvers detected. Observation patterns indicate tracking, another added. Multiple independent nodes are maintaining continuous surveillance. Vera's eyes narrowed slightly. They are not reacting emotionally, she said. They are reacting structurally. A pause followed. Then, a new alert chimed. Anomaly detected. An analyst said quickly, orbital energy spike. The holographic display shifted instantly. Above Earth, a faint but measurable increase in energy signatures appeared. Not from the landing zone, but from a separate orbital vector. Source. Vera asked. The technician tracked the signal. Internal faction, he replied after a moment, unaffiliated with diplomatic unit. A subtle tension rippled across the bridge. One of the officers stepped forward. They've initiated a demonstration? The analyst hesitated. It appears controlled, limited output. Vera did not look surprised, but her expression hardened. On whose authorization? Silence. No immediate answer, because none was required. The implication was already clear. A faction within the alien forces had chosen to assert dominance independently. A show of power, not a coordinated diplomatic move, but unilateral decision to reinforce superiority through intimidation, prepare for possible escalation. Vera ordered. On the surface, the alien delegation remained in place, unaware, at least initially, of what was unfolding above them. Then the response began, not from Earth's surface, but from across it. On multiple screens within human command centers, the same anomaly appeared almost simultaneously. Energy spike detected in orbit, an analyst reported. Trajectory analysis? Directed, not random. The officer at the Central Operations Center watched the data carefully. No immediate threat vector towards surface assets. Another technician added, but the tone in the room had already shifted, because humans had seen this pattern before. Unidentified energy buildup, orbital activity, potential escalation. Activate contingency protocols, the officer said calmly. No alarm sounded. No public warnings were issued, but beneath the surface, systems began to align. Satellite networks adjusted their orientation. Communication relays synchronized. Data channels opened between previously independent units. What had been fragmented moments ago now moved with quiet cohesion. On the alien ship, the analysts tracked the same changes. They're responding, one said, but not directly, another added. No visible weapons deployment. Vera watched both feeds simultaneously, orbital and surface. Continue monitoring, she said. Then, the situation escalated. The alien faction's energy output increased slightly. Not enough to cause destruction, but enough to send a message. A demonstration of capability. A calculated signal of superiority. On Earth, the human systems registered the increase instantly. Signal intensity rising, an analyst reported. Still within non-impact threshold, another added. But the officer's expression remained unchanged. Track all supporting vectors, he ordered. Within seconds, additional data streams were integrated. Not just the orbital signal, but the subtle shifts accompanying it. Communication patterns, satellite alignment changes, latent anomalies across monitoring grids. And then, a response emerged. Not a single action, but a coordinated adjustment across multiple systems. Signals were rerouted, frequencies shifted, surveillance focus intensified. Electronic countermeasures began to operate in a passive, non-aggressive mode, interfering subtly with the alien faction's ability to maintain stable coordination. No explosions, no visible weapons fire, just disruption. Precise, measured, effective. On the alien bridge, one of the analysts frowned. Commander, we're experiencing signal instability. Define instability, Vera said. Partial interference across coordination channels. Minor degradation in synchronization. Another technician looked up sharply. It's not external jamming in the traditional sense. Then what is it? An officer asked. The technician hesitated. It's adaptive. A silence followed that word. Adaptive. Because the interference wasn't coming from a single source. It was emerging from multiple overlapping systems, each responding to the alien faction's activity in its own way, yet producing a unified effect. On Earth, the officer monitored the situation closely. No direct escalation had been authorized. No offensive action had been initiated. And yet, the environment itself seemed to respond as if it had been prepared for this exact scenario. Maintain current posture, he said. No engagement unless initiated. Back on the alien ship, the faction's demonstration began to lose coherence. Their coordination faltered slightly under the unexpected disruptions. Not enough to fail entirely, but enough to force recalibration. What was meant to be a display of dominance had become unstable. Vera observed the situation without intervening immediately, because now the reality of the situation had become undeniable. Humanity had not reacted with fear. It had reacted with structure, and more importantly, it had reacted faster than expected. The demonstration that was meant to assert control had instead revealed something else entirely. A civilization that could detect, adapt, and respond to external pressure without revealing the full extent of its capabilities. And in that realization, the miscalculation became clear. The aliens had assumed their presence would create imbalance. Instead, it had triggered a system that already knew how to restore it. The orbital silence returned. But it was no longer the same kind of silence that had greeted the alien vessel upon arrival. Now it carried weight. Inside the bridge, no one spoke immediately after the failed demonstration. Data continued to stream across holographic displays, but the meaning behind it had changed. What was once interpreted as routine observation had become evidence of something far more complex. Commander Vera stood motionless, her gaze fixed on the earth below. The blue planet rotated peacefully, clouds drifting across continents, oceans reflecting sunlight in slow, unbroken motion. From a distance, it looked unchanged, undisturbed. But the alien crew now understood a difficult truth. What appeared calm on the surface was not absence of awareness. It was control. Status report. Vera finally said. A technician responded quickly. Surface delegation. Remain stable. No escalation from human ground forces. Their monitoring systems are active, but no offensive posture has been initiated. Another officer added, orbital faction has reduced output. Synchronization restored partially after interference. Vera nodded slightly. Casualties, none confirmed. A pause. That detail mattered, because despite the miscalculation, despite the disruption, humanity had not responded with immediate retaliation. They had responded with restraint, observation, containment, understanding. Vera turned toward the central display, where all collected data, surface, orbital, historical, and real-time, was now layered into a single composite model. Compile final analysis, she ordered. The system began synthesizing everything they had observed since entering the solar system. Patterns, responses, historical behavior, real-time reactions. The results appeared gradually. At first, summaries of human technological capability, then behavioral trends, then adaptive patterns, and finally, a consolidated classification. The room grew quieter as the conclusion formed, not because it was surprising, but because it confirmed what they had begun to suspect long before this moment. Humans were not merely reactive, they were evolutionarily responsive. Their systems, biological, technological, and social, were structured in such a way that external pressure did not destabilize them. It strengthened them. They convert disruption into advancement, one analyst said quietly, reading the same conclusion. Conflict into coordination, another added. Threat into adaptation, a third finished. Vera's expression remained composed, but her eyes reflected something deeper now. Not uncertainty, but reassessment. Reclassify Earth, she said calmly. The technician hesitated only briefly before inputting the command. The designation changed on the central display. From a standard observation classification to a high-risk adaptive civilization. Recommendation status? the technician asked. Vera did not respond immediately. Her attention remained on the live feed from the surface, where the alien delegation stood among human observers. Two civilizations, facing each other without hostility, but with complete awareness that neither side had revealed its full capabilities. We withdraw any assumptions of dominance, she said at last. A subtle shift passed through the bridge. Maintain distance, she continued. No further demonstrations. No additional probes. No escalation unless provoked. The officers acknowledged the command, because the implication was no longer theoretical. They had encountered a species that did not respond predictably to pressure, and unpredictability, in the context of interstellar engagement, was dangerous. On Earth, the Human Command Center continued to monitor the situation. Alien orbital activity stabilizing, and analysts reported. Surface delegation remained stationary. Another added. The officer at the center studied the data carefully. No aggressive follow-up, he said. Correct. He nodded once. Maintain observation. There was no celebration, no declaration of victory, because from the human perspective, this was not a conflict that had been won. It was a situation that had been contained and studied. Back aboard the alien vessel, Vera issued one final directive. Transmit classification update to the Federation. The technician prepared the message. Summary? Vera paused for a moment, then spoke clearly. Planet Earth is not unprepared. Another pause. Humanity is not weak. She turned slightly toward the holographic projection of the planet. They are adaptive, coordinated under pressure, capable of detecting anomalies beyond conventional parameters, and responsive to external stimuli in ways that increase their resilience over time. The bridge remained silent as the transmission was finalized. Recommendation? Vera's answer came without hesitation. Avoid provocation. The message was sent. Across the vast distance of space, the Alien Federation would receive a report that would reshape their understanding of this small blue planet, not as a primitive world, not as an easy target, but as something far more significant, a civilization that appeared fragmented, yet became unified when tested, a species that seemed unremarkable in peace, but revealed its true nature under pressure. As the alien ship began its slow withdrawal from Earth's orbit, the final realization settled among its crew. They had not encountered a defenseless world. They had encountered a species that had already faced countless pressures in its own history, and had turned each one into strength. And in doing so, humanity had unknowingly prepared itself for encounters like this long before they ever happened. The aliens had arrived expecting weakness. They left with something far more sobering: respect, and a lingering understanding that would stay with them long after Earth disappeared from view. They had not been the first to observe humanity. They had only been the first to realize that humanity had been observing back.